If you believe advocating for your health is important, but not always easy, you're going to love Speak Up for Your Health, hosted by Dr. Arkell Giorgio. On Speak Up for Your Health, Dr. Giorgio talks with patients about how they overcame feeling intimidated by today's complex medical system and how they use their voices to finally get the care they need. You'll hear real and personal stories like Marielle's 11-year journey to diagnose a medical mystery. Why navigate the complexities of healthcare alone when Speak Up for Your Health can guide you? Listen and follow Speak Up for Your Health on your favorite podcast app, and you can find all the links you need at healthpodcastnetwork.com/speakup. That's healthpodcastnetwork.com/speakup.
And we filled that gap by identifying what the students needed. The video on demand has 20 plus hours of content, so students can, fast forward to neuro, or they can back up to musculoskeletal or look at dermatology, again, on their own time, and do it in small chunks as they need and they see fit to supplement their learning and get them ready for certification.
What's the roadmap for nurse practitioners when it comes to the certification process? And where does certification fit into the scheme of things for nurse practitioner success and fulfillment? Let's talk all about it with author, nurse practitioner, educator, and researcher, Dr. Karen Myrick, the Director of Nursing Education and Practice at Springer Publishing, right here on episode 510 of The Nurse Keith Show. Well, hello there. This is Nurse Keith. This podcast is always about you, your personal and professional development, your career, and the healthcare system writ large. And I'm here to share education, ideas, and informative interviews with some of the most inspiring people from the worlds of healthcare, nursing, medicine, and beyond. I love having you along for the ride, and I thank you, of course, as always, from the bottom of my nurse podcaster's heart, for being part of the growing Nurse Keith Nation. If you'd like to help other people find the show, you can leave a rating and review over on Apple Podcasts. You can also share the show with anyone who you think might enjoy it or get something out of it. And no matter how you're interacting with us here at the Nurse Keith Show, including listening right now like you're doing, thanks for being here. This episode of the Nurse Keith Show is brought to you in collaboration with Springer Publishing, who've been delivering award-winning healthcare education and exam prep materials focused on nursing, behavioral health, and the health sciences for more than 70 years. My thanks to Springer for their kind support. And please head over to nursekeith.com to find the show notes for this episode. You can also find it in any podcast app where you happen to be listening. And like I said, we're here again with Karen Myrick. She is the Director of Nursing Education and Practice at Springer Publishing. And Karen, I'm so happy to have you here, and it's nice to chat again. You and I have already checked in once and talked about all this stuff around certification. And my first question for you is, has certification become kind of like a gold standard or something that most nurse practitioners aspire to in order to move their career forward?
Well, yes, and thank you so much for having me, Nurse Keith. Certification for nurse practitioners can come in a couple of different forms. It can come as a requirement to practice, which it is in many states. It is actually not in California, which is a little bit fun fact. And it is the pathway for national recognition. And if you have a specialty certification, it also would demonstrate that you have expertise and competence in a specialty area. So it can be a legal requirement to practice, but can also be a nice to have to demonstrate special competency in a specialty area.
Okay, so let's focus first on the legal requirement to practice. So what I take from that is that in order to become a family nurse practitioner, you have to be certified as a family nurse practitioner to be one. And what you're saying is that there are certain states where you don't have to have that. And how does that even work if you're not certified, say, to be an FNP?
So there is a national certification. There's two different certifying bodies. There's the AANP and the ANCC. And we do have state-by-state requirements for practice. So in most states, we have our LACE criteria, which is licensure, accreditation, certification, and education. And so the C part there, the certification, becomes important depending upon your state by state requirements. So in most states, again, California is really the only one right now. New York has some special provisions, but in every other state, you are required to obtain national certification in order to practice. So usually you will first get your state license, and in order to do that, you need to get certified to be able to apply for state licensure.
Interesting. So California is the one outlier that does it a little differently, and those NPs don't have to take the national boards, right?
Yeah, that is correct for now. We do think sometimes that will change, especially when you have a nurse practitioner who may work in two different states. So there's different requirements in those states. So you may need certification to work right next door. Or if you're traveling, you would need that certification in each individual state that you practice.
So it sounds like it would behoove nurse practitioners, even in California, to get the national certification so that they have mobility and they can work wherever they want, whenever they want, based on their needs and their lifestyle.
That is correct.
Yeah.
And also, again, to demonstrate, that you have proficiency in a specialty area, be that family nurse practitioner, adult gero nurse practitioner, or if it's psych mental health nurse practitioner as well.
Right. Okay. So aside from getting certified just so you can practice, like FNP, AGNP, et cetera, right? Like you just mentioned, then there's, like you said, wanting to show your expertise. And RNs will go and get their, emergency nursing certification so that for one, they learn a lot of great stuff having that certification, but then they also put it on their resume. It can maybe lead to maybe a bump in pay, and it also can open doors to certain opportunities that one might not have if one didn't have that, TNCC or whatever certification it is that you've gone after, right? So I'm a board certified nurse coach, which is actually a real live certification that's recognized, by all the certifying bodies, and that holds a certain cachet and, I don't know, economic power and recognition to have that. So for nurse practitioners, what certifications are people generally going for? What are the ones that are sort of the most hot in the current climate? And what do you feel are the ones that are, I don't know, most efficacious for people to think about?
Well, for example, the requirements, so national certification, would be overarching for the adult gero nurse practitioner, family nurse practitioner, and these would be in the primary care specialty. There's primary care, and then there's also acute care. So acute care would be more in the hospital, acute practice, and those certifications are also for the lifespan of family nurse practitioners or adult gero. And then you have your psych mental health nurse practitioners. Those are kind of your baseline certifications that people get. You can add on to that demonstrating proficiency in certain areas. For example, I'm an orthopedic nurse practitioner, or ONP-BC. And so I practice in orthopedics, so it is very good to have that extra certification. There's wonderful certifications in palliative care and emergency practice. So there's lots of different certifications to get, again, demonstrating proficiency not only in your core group of family nurse practitioner, primary care, but then also in the orthopedic specialty or palliative care as well. This can lead to career advancement. It can open doors. It can help you climb the clinical ladder as well.
Right. And are these NP specialty certifications, like orthopedics, for instance, are these time consuming to earn initially, to get your initial certification, and then to become recertified? Is it expensive, and is it very time burdensome in terms of keeping it up over the course of, I don't know, a decade or 2 decades?
It is time consuming and it depends, it can be on the expensive side, although a lot of employers will actually pay for reimbursement for this type of advanced education. And it really does look good to a specialty practice. If you're the person making the decision to hire somebody, maybe you will look at that additional certification as expertise in that area that's been demonstrated through rigorous, educational experiences, additional clinical practice, and always a wonderful certification exam to prove that expertise. So it can be time consuming, although when you're in that specialty area, that extra education, that continuing ed, lifelong learning, it's really beneficial and helpful. So I do think it weighs, it's worth the work that is put in and the financial commitment as well.
Mm-hmm. And in your role as an educator and an author, and we'll talk about the books you've written with Springer, et cetera, I'm curious, do you get from the NP zeitgeist out there in the world right now, especially here in the US, do you feel like NPs are really focused on attaining these kind of certifications and keeping them? Like, is it sort of the talk of the town in the NP realm?
It really is.
Mm-hmm.
And especially, again, for job advancement and just even to land a position in a specialty area, to have that additional certification demonstrates that you have the will, the desire. You actually are working towards that goal to get the additional certification. So I do think it is a thing out there in practice where people are actually going for these certifications that are in addition to those that they need to have. They also want to get the nice to have and just, again, advance their career within a specialty.
Yeah. So tell me about you. So did you start out as an RN, and did you work as an RN for a long time before you kind of moved into advanced practice? Or was it something did you go into advanced practice pretty quickly?
I feel like I have a really interesting trajectory, and it actually goes to show everybody that you really can do whatever you want in whatever specialty. You just have to have the drive. I started out right away from graduation in labor and delivery, and I was a nurse in labor and delivery for over a decade. It was a wonderful job. And then from there, I decided I wanted to go back to school. Basically, when I met the neonatal nurse practitioners, I was too afraid to take care of a 1-pound baby, but I was so in awe of their practice. And so I ended up going back to school and I obtained my adult nurse practitioner, which there isn't even a certification anymore. It's now adult Gero.
Right.
Right. And so then I worked in the emergency department where they told me I must obtain the family nurse practitioner, an additional postmaster's certification within a year. And I worked in the ER for 5 years. I loved it, but I really didn't like some of the death, the dying. I found it very difficult, and I loved any orthopedic case that came in. It was my favorite. And therefore, I ended up going to the specialty of orthopedics, where I was encouraged, but not required, to get the orthopedic nurse practitioner certification. And so I went down that path, and I quite enjoy orthopedics, and I stay active in the orthopedic urgent care currently.
Mm-hmm.
I miss labor and delivery, though.
Yeah. So what is it about orthopedics? Like what was the draw? Like why did you like it so much and want to stick with it?
I think there's several things. One, I feel like orthopedic injuries really affect people's mobility. And without our mobility, we really don't have our health. And so I enjoy helping people through any injury where they can get back their mobility and then have a better quality of life, be more active. I enjoy the sports medicine aspect of orthopedics a lot because I like to work with athletes who have an injury, an overuse injury, whatever the case may be, and then seeing them get back at a high level to practice their sport. It just really does my heart good, and I enjoy it. I also think that the musculoskeletal system is fascinating, and it always involves neuro and dermatology, and I think that those are just a fun fun systems to work through with our patients.
Mm-hmm. And it's it's interesting that you have a specialty in orthopedics, because when, just from my perspective out there in the world, like when we talk about nurse practitioners, it's kind of like everybody and their mother wants to be an FNP, right? And you hear about acute care adult Jerry NPs, et cetera. But you don't, I mean, I can't even think of when I last heard anyone mention orthopedic nurse practitioner. Do you know what I mean? It's like, it doesn't come up much in the conversations that I am privy to. So it just feels like it shows that there's a lot more to it than people think. And there's a lot more choices, I guess, within the sphere, right?
I agree completely. And also just to note is that in that specialty that I happen to be in, there are a lot more PAs or physician assistants. It's just the way that everybody falls into place there. So it's kind of rare as a orthopedic nurse practitioner to be in practice. So I think that it's a great specialty, and I enjoy doing it as a nurse and demonstrating what nurses can really do, especially with the specialty certification. I just feel like it lends a lot of credibility, patient satisfaction, better outcomes. So I think it's important, and it's fun. It's just a fun job.
Right. I like that.
Mm-hmm.
And in the second half, we're going to talk about your work at Springer and some of the writing you've done, et cetera. But I also first wanted to ask you about your work as a tenured professor. So I surmise from your bio that you're a professor at several universities. And I also read that you're the program director for the Postmaster's Certificate program in Orthopedics and Sports Medicine at Mass General at their Orthopedic Academy. So tell me just a little bit, give me a snapshot of your work in the academic space.
Sure. I have taught in higher education for 14 years now. And I started off at a state college that was wonderful and my alma mater. And I worked there for a period of time. And then I decided the commute was too far. And I had other opportunities where I could be in an interprofessional college that was part of a university. And that interprofessional college was just amazing we had engineering and physical therapy in a biomechanics lab. And so it was a very good choice. And so I just have worked in a couple of different universities, but made great career choices that advanced every single time.
Mm-hmm. And so you're working with NP students, right? And
I am.
What's the age range you're finding of NP students right now? Is it a very, very broad age range?
It's a lovely range of ages, and we start from right out of normal RN school, right out of the college level, and we have direct entry into the DNP or MSN programs. And so we have students that are, 21, 22 years old, and then we have students who come back to get their additional degree later in life. And so I've had as old as 63 in classes. I think it's wonderful. There's a pretty wide range. And you can go one semester to the next and have a different shift in that age range. But we really do see all ages coming back. Pretty much they're on the younger side and, not directly out of school, but a couple years into practice. That seems to be the trend.
Mm-hmm. But do you feel like the different generations of people who are, interested in and entering the space, that there's room for them and they all can find their place?
Absolutely. And I also feel that I love watching the students work together. They really help each other out, and how one learns may be different from the next. They get into study groups and help each other out, whether it's virtual or live. And it's just it's really great. You do have to tailor your own education, your own pedagogy towards the students of different generations, because we all do learn differently, and different learner types as well.
Mm-hmm. And I would assume that those different generations of nurse practitioner students have something to offer each other, because you're coming from a different place, you have digital natives who are 21 years old, who are pretty much born with a device in their hand. And then you have those who are my age in their 60s who, have had to adapt and to these new realities. So it's probably very interesting to watch how they all kind of find their place, because, it's a very shifting and dynamic world in healthcare right now.
Yeah, it really is. And you really do have to put teams together to help each other out. And I love doing group work, especially intergenerational. I almost plan it that way so that it works out. And then you also, again, you have to adjust your own teaching style to make sure you're meeting every different learner's needs on every level. And whether they're visual learners or auditory, you have to do that as well as generational.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So when we come back from the break, I want to dig into your writing, the work you've done in terms of creating products for students to, learn and get ready for certification and pass their certifications. And most of that is tied to your work at Springer. So we're going to dig right back into that in the second half of the show. So hang in there with us, and we'll be right back with the second half of episode 510 of the Nurse Keith Show. And we're with Karen Myrick, and she is the Director of Nursing Education and Practice at Springer Publishing. Hey everyone, let's take a quick pause for the cause, shall we? If you're in need of personalized, holistic career coaching to elevate your nursing and healthcare career, look no further than nursekeith.com and Nurse Keith Coaching. I can help you with your job search and interview strategies, resume and cover letter optimization, LinkedIn maximization, and envisioning the future of your career. I can also support you in launching your own business, learning how to write and blog as a side hustle, or launch your own podcast. And please note that you can receive 10% off your first coaching package if you mention the show. So email me at keith@nursekeith.com to schedule a complimentary 30-minute strategy session. Now, let's get back to the episode at hand. And welcome back to the second half of the episode. We're here again with friend of the pod and my new friend and colleague, Dr. Karen Myrick. She's the Director of Nursing Education and Practice at Springer Publishing, and she is an author, an educator, and an amazing nurse practitioner. So, Karen, I wanted to ask you about some of the work you've done in terms of creating products that help students and nurse practitioners kind of get ready for all of these certification processes. So I know you've written a registered nurse orthopedic certification review textbook. So you've done stuff for RNs. A lot of the work you're doing and have done focuses on APRNs, nurse practitioners. So you wrote a health assessment textbook for APRNs, and then you've written case studies in orthopedics for APRNs. These are all for Springer. So what does it take to write a textbook and case studies like this? Like, what do you need to bring to the table in order to have the skills to do that?
Well, I'll tell you that the two are fairly different in the process. Case studies was probably the easiest to write because that's what you're doing on a daily basis. And so these are just cases from clinical practice, of course, de-identified, but it's what you do on a daily basis. So just pulling all of those pieces in, the history, the physical assessment, but it's pretty much standard fare for all of us because we do it all the time. Now, the health assessment textbook really took some reflection of several years, over a decade of teaching to see what worked for students, what kind of stuck, and what did not work well. And that being said, too, this textbook was written 5 years ago, and it incorporated a lot of what we needed at the time, which was diversity. And we really had a lot of special areas such as pregnancy, transgender care, and we put that in each and every individual chapter. So musculoskeletal it included transgender care and the elderly population, the pregnant population, instead of what most textbooks do is put it lumped together at the end in a chapter. So we put it into each individual chapter as we went. And that took a lot of thought to think of how to do that best. We also did the normal health assessment of, say, the neurological system. And the second half of that chapter was the abnormals. Most textbooks will put this together within the chapter. So that separating it out really was pretty unique. And I feel like a lot of people who adopted that textbook enjoyed that. It does take a lot of organization. deadlines. I do well with deadlines, be them that I give them to myself or that the editor gives them to me, but I do well with deadlines. And I think it really takes a lot of planning, teamwork, because you need to have contributing authors. And you also have to be a project manager as well as the author and the editor as well. So it takes a lot of planning and time. And the upfront work is really key to determining what you want that product to look like and why.
Mm-hmm. And when you're writing these types of certification prep, et cetera, like how often do these need to be revised? Because the science is changing, the evidence is changing. Healthcare is dynamic and, there's always new evidence coming out. So how do you make sure that when you're prepping for these types of programs and putting them together, that you're staying up to date? Because that seems like that would be incredibly burdensome.
It is probably one of the most difficult things in publishing, especially when you have a textbook that is paper. And so that does take, approximately it's 5 years, they say, that a textbook can be outdated by the time it's in print. So having new mechanisms with electronic books, it does seem to be where everybody's going. The students like it, faculty like it. And so it's easier to maintain your updates on something that is digital. And you can also update people with blast emails who have maybe already subscribed and they're in that system, but you can give them updates. The practice guidelines have changed for breast cancer screening, whatever the case may be, but they change frequently. So you have to stay on top of things and really monitor everything that's in that book. So you're absolutely right. It's dynamic and changing all the time.
Mm-hmm. So we have the electronic, and I know we are heading in that direction. And, the days of, the physical book are, some of us will always love physical books and we want the textbook in our lap, but we all also recognize how, the electronic is kind of where things are going. And there is a lot of convenience and flexibility around electronic publishing. And speaking of, different ways to approach things and using technology in the publishing space, I know you, within your role at Springer, you've been moving more in the video direction. So tell me a little bit about the video on demand and what you're doing and what you feel like where video fits in the whole ecosystem.
Sure. In response to customer needs, student feedback, focus groups, we understand that students like to learn with video. They also like to learn on their own time. So things that are in bite-sized pieces, so to speak, small lectures that have the visual component. So you can see the PowerPoint, you can see somebody speaking to you. And then you also have the audio component, and then tie in some questions to get the kinesthetic learners to actually practice those questions back and forth. So the video on demand was a product that came from need that was existing, and we filled that gap by identifying what the students needed. The video on demand has 20 plus hours of content. So students can, fast forward to neuro, or they can back up to musculoskeletal or look at dermatology, again, on their own time, and do it in small chunks as they need and they see fit to supplement their learning and get them ready for certification.
Mm-hmm. And asynchronous learning seems to be where most people are most comfortable because, do it from the comfort of your home. You can do it on your own time. If you have children, if you have elderly parents, you're working, whatever it happens to be, that asynchronous seems to be, even at universities and colleges, asynchronous learning is kind of big, right? There's something nice about interacting with students and professors in real time, but being able to study when you can, maybe you want to do your course at 2 a.m. Maybe that's the way it works for you. So I think that's a smart direction for you all to go at Springer. And I'm curious, you all are focused mostly on FNPs and adult GERI, right? And I think you had mentioned to me that it's mostly primary care right now. Is that true?
That is true. It's mostly primary care right now.
Mm-hmm. And What about acute care? Like, are you moving in the acute care direction? And what does that look like? And how is it different? Like, what do you have to tackle for acute care?
And so there are textbooks available for the acute care nurse practitioner certification exam, and they are currently working on a video product for that same topical area. It's a big practice area, acute care. There's more primary care nurse practitioners in the country, but it is an area that lots of nurse practitioners practice, and certification is something that is needed for the overwhelming majority of them. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
the product is coming out for the acute care space.
Mm-hmm. And you feel like that's important because more NPs are entering acute care because the opportunities are there, you think, sort of in the job market in general?
And it's also, nurse and nurse practitioner desire for that, patient group that they enjoy working with. So whatever that is, if it's acute care that they enjoy, the ICU, I think that, you're able to work in that space if you have that certification.
Mm-hmm. And are you finding that the doing video works both for, let's say, people who are just out of school getting their initial certification, like say as a FNP, right, or a AGMP? And is there that much demand also for kind of the specialty certifications in terms of the video?
Yes, there are definitely more demand for some of those specialty areas. Also, psych mental health nurse practitioner, that's a booming
Mm-hmm.
specialty. And so there is a product coming out as well that is for psych mental health nurse practitioner certification review.
Mm-hmm. And what's your vision? Like, where do you feel like things are going to go when it comes to digital education, especially in the NP space? Like, do you feel like video is kind of going to continue to grow and be king? Or do you feel like there's room for, I don't know, VR and mixed reality and all that sort of stuff? Like, where do you think it's going to head in the next, I don't know, 10 years?
It'll be interesting to watch, won't it? I do think that there's lots of room to grow. And I think the vision is that video is going to be one of the most accessible, fills the most need, the gap that's out there. I feel like there's a lot of people going back to school who are busy. They do have
Mm-hmm.
they have their own family and they're trying to fit this in when they can. I personally think, with my own pedagogical knowledge and expertise, is that it takes a combination of learning styles and meeting those needs in order to really understand the material. So I do think some people can read a textbook and they know it, they're good. But
Mm-hmm.
there's another group of people that need that reinforcement with the video, or maybe reading just doesn't stick. So I do think that video is a great way to go. Virtual reality is wonderful, but it's difficult to make sure that students are getting appropriate content and then applying, and then you have to really watch one-on-one. So are
Mm-hmm.
they doing things the correct way, be it an IV insertion or whatever the case is? How do you monitor that? So it's a little bit more difficult, whereas video can be controlled, it can be edited, and you can have a product that fits the needs of all of the mapping of those certifying bodies.
Mm-hmm. And it kind of makes sense that, video education is kind of the direction that we seem to be heading, because if you look at the broader culture and the popularity of YouTube and TikTok and, videos on even, Instagram, it just feels like video is just what people find most comfortable and kind of just where the culture is in general. So it seems like you and the folks at Springer, like, you're trying to meet people where they are, and video is what it seems like people are asking for, right?
Right. And, people do want to be entertained. And so there's a level of having a little bit of humor along with the best way to explain something like pathophysiology. And getting all of that together is definitely good for the students to learn from. And so I do think that it is a great direction to go in. And I do feel like it is good for the students. They seem to enjoy it very much. And it's a popular product that has helped with exam success.
Mm-hmm. And is Is it mostly like, let's say, you talking on screen, or does it also go into like other aspects of the video? Is it more kind of talking head type of video?
So some of the fun things, there's great production, and some of it is me talking on the screen and
Mm-hmm.
explaining. Other times we go into just a slide that has an algorithm. I love learning by algorithms. If it's this, you go here. If it's that, you go there. And I feel like that is a wonderful way to learn. So most of the chapters and the body systems also have an algorithm that goes along with either the treatment plan, the diagnosis, and that's really very well received. The other thing we do is to have walkthrough questions. So there's a question that would be a certification type of question. And then
Mm-hmm.
we walk through the stem of the question, identify what we need to look at there, and then go through the answers one by one with a robust rationale that'll help the students understand why an answer was correct and why the incorrect answer is incorrect. So that's
Mm-hmm.
really helpful when you're preparing for a certification exam where you have to answer a lot of questions.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of the exams, I just wanted to ask, you know, I know these exams have to keep evolving with the science, and they change over time, and there's lots of people like yourself, I'm sure, who are item writers for these certifying bodies. And I'm curious, how much how quickly do you feel like the exams are changing and you have to keep changing your products to keep up with what's happening out there? Like you mentioned, transgender care, et cetera, et cetera. Like there's, psychedelic nursing is slowly becoming a thing. And, cannabis nursing is starting to emerge on the NCLEX. So it sounds like there's a lot you have to keep your finger on the pulse of in order to keep products up to date.
That is very true. And
Mm-hmm.
ANCC and AANP will put
Mm-hmm.
out new blueprints frequently. There's not a specific cadence to when those come out. They do come out between 2 and 5 years, it seems, historically. And so when those come out, we all look at that blueprint, which is just identifying which areas they'll be tested on, what specific questions, are they patho, are they pharmacology? And then we go back and look at the product and make edits as you need to. But you're right, you have to stay right on top of everything, not only what the exam is asking, what clinical practice is desiring, and then the outcomes overall.
Mm-hmm. And for you personally and professionally, do you feel like the video is going to continue to be one of your main focuses, or do you feel like you still will have the time, energy, and the need to write actual, review books? Do you feel like your work and kind of that book space is going to continue too?
I think what we're seeing trending is that the paper work is significantly decreasing.
Mm-hmm.
And over time, video and audio products are increasing, and anything interactive certainly is on the rise. So I
Mm-hmm.
do think there will be a focus over time to decrease the print writing, but yet still have it available for people who like it. And
Yeah.
then the video and the audio will be increasing to the point that I think that'll be the majority of how you deliver education.
Yeah. So it's going to supersede the written stuff pretty significantly in the years to come, right?
I
Yeah.
believe that.
So it sounds like, even though Springer is a publishing house, and when you think about publishing, you think about books, and they have tons of books, of course. And I've already interviewed several authors from Springer, but it sounds like publishing houses are pivoting because, books just aren't where people are at. That's not where the zeitgeist is really, to a large extent these days.
Exactly correct.
Mm-hmm.
And you just try to pivot the best you can to
Mm-hmm.
respond to the market and what students and educators need.
Yeah, and the NP schools and the RN schools are doing the same because everybody's kind of moving in the same general direction at this point.
Exactly.
Yeah. So before we go, I have some questions I ask all my guests, and they're not really related to what we've been talking about. Are you game for like a little lightning round?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for playing along. Okay. So, and your answer to this first question, it can be anything. Like it doesn't have to be related to anything to your work. But my question is, of everything there is to understand, what's something about humans, human nature, about life that you would really like to understand?
Oh my goodness, that's such a good question.
It's a big one, I know.
I know. I would love to understand motivation better. What motivates somebody to maybe go back to school, have a certain practice, do a certain sport? What is the motivation? What's the motivation behind everything that people do? Because I think if you can understand what motivates somebody, you can then encourage them to do more or less of that, depending on what it is. You
Mhm.
can also support whatever that is, because if they're motivated to do something, you can support them in that desire and that goal. So I think if I was able to understand the motivation um, of everybody, I feel like that would be pretty huge.
You sound like an educator. And you
I
also
am.
sound like the mother of a teenager.
Check.
Yeah, yeah. There we go. Okay. All right. Second question. Who's one of your, we can say, heroes? Like one of those people who just means a lot to you. They could be living or dead, could be a really famous person, or it could be someone just from your personal life or family who just holds a special place in your heart.
That's a very, very good question and a very easy one to answer.
Mm-hmm.
So I am a martial artist and I
Oh,
practice Kung Fu karate and also Aikido, a little bit of Muay Thai kickboxing as well.
wow.
There is a sensei that is at the dojo that is awe-inspiring. He even had a abdominal aortic aneurysm 3 years ago, and that is not something people do well with. And
No.
he survived and is now again practicing on the mat. And every day that I am with him or near him or have an interaction with him, that motivates me to become a better martial artist. And I think he is truthfully an amazing human being who commands not only the art, but he also does preschool teaching. And I'm not sure how he marries those things together, but is truthfully just inspiring and highly motivating, and just really have the utmost respect.
Wow, that's a cool story. I had no idea about the martial arts aspect of your life, so I'm glad to know that. And I mean, the fact that he survived a AAA, I mean, that alone,
Unbelievable. Unbelievable.
is amazing. So anyway, okay,
Yes.
thank you. So third question,
Yeah.
is there a book, or it could even be a film, a movie that doesn't necessarily have to have changed your life, but just has really impacted you, and maybe one that you kind of go back to on a regular basis, like a touchstone?
But that's a good question. And I'm terrible because I don't watch a lot of movies or
That's okay.
TV.
Neither
don't
do I.
don't read a lot of books
Mhm.
because I'm always doing things and I'm always writing and practicing and doing other things. So I think probably early on and it's just going to be geeky because that's me, but early on when I started getting into orthopedics, I read this amazing textbook on biomechanics, and it just really brought home to me how the body actually works. And it made me think about my practice differently, about my teaching differently. And it just really had an impact. So geeky answer, but it definitely is my answer, and it is me. So it was a book on biomechanics. I don't even know who the author is, but it did change how I practice, how I teach, and how I see my patients as well, even some research projects.
We can accept geeky here. It's totally okay. Geek, geeky is
Way to
welcome.
go.
Yeah. So, all right. Last question. If you were named queen of the world tomorrow and you had ultimate power and you could pretty much do anything and everything you wanted, what would be the first thing you would want to do to improve the lives of your subjects, bearing in mind that you have ultimate power? You can do anything.
Boy, these are such amazing, wonderful questions. And I really do
Thanks.
wish I had that power when I woke up tomorrow morning.
No
That would be
kidding.
pretty awesome. Um, I'm not going to go world peace because I think that is going to be a little bit bigger than just the land, and that's including the entire world.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think that if we were able to, we'll tie it back into the first question, to motivate everybody to become a better version of themselves,
Mm-hmm.
no matter what that is, because that could be very, very different from individual to individual. But I think if we could figure out how to motivate people to be their best selves and improve their own quality of life, which would then improve those around them. And then your land, it would all be better off if everybody was motivated and happy and chasing their dreams, but to be a better version of themselves. I think that would be a really good, lofty goal.
That's lovely. Wow, I really like that. Thank you. You'd be a beneficent queen. So thank you. Appreciate that. Thanks for playing along with those questions. I know
Of course.
they're kind of off the wall and, little out of left field compared to what we were talking about, but
I loved it.
I appreciate it. Well, I really, really appreciate you being here. And people who want to check out the work you do at Springer, obviously go to springerpub.com because it's all over there. And there's the video on demand. There's the actual physical books. If you want an actual book in your hands, they exist. They still do. They can be obtained. And I really appreciate all the work you do in the world. And thanks for being a really powerful, dedicated, motivated educator. I think it's great. We need people like you out there helping nurses become who they really want to be.
And thank you very much for having me. This was absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much.
Well, there you have it. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Nurse Keith Show. Remember, the show notes are at nursekeith.com. They're also on any app where you happen to be listening to this podcast. I hope you feel uplifted and empowered from this episode, and I encourage you to take inspired action every day in the interest of your personal and professional satisfaction and development. If you need personalized holistic career coaching to elevate your nursing career, check out nursekeith.com and Nurse Keith Coaching. Mention the show and get 10% off your first coaching package. And you can also become a patron at patreon.com at patreon.com/Nurse Keith if you'd like to help support the show. We are proud members of the Health Podcast Network at healthpodcastnetwork.com, and we're adroitly produced by the inimitable Rob Johnston of 520R Podcasting. And once again, my thanks to Springer Publishing for their collaboration and support on this special episode of The Nurse Keith Show. And as I said, you can find them at springerpub.com. And before we say goodbye, I'll leave you with this quote, one of my very favorites you've probably heard before by the musician Robert Fripp. May my living honor my parents. May my living repay the debt of my existence. Be well, dig deep, seek joy, keep in touch. This is Nurse Keith saying adios till next time from beautiful Santa Fe, New Mexico. And the wonderful Dr. Karen Myrick saying arrivederci from
Connecticut.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Myrick. Thanks to Springer Publishing. Thank you all for listening. And we will catch you, of course, on the proverbial flip side.